is up? We are back. Stop Loss with Spencer, episode 17. Sticking with sweater season, even though it is definitely not sweater season in Texas. It's like 86 degrees today, and I am regretting committing so early to wearing sweaters. But anyways, my commitment is to you, and we're going to keep it going, okay? So today we are talking about MGUs. We love acronyms in insurance, so what is an MGU? It does not stand for materialistic geriatric umpires. Nope, it stands for managing general underwriters. Okay, so what are managing general underwriter, or they are managing general underwriters, plural. Okay, what does that mean? Well, maybe the best way to describe it is what it is not. It is not a direct writer of stop loss like your Sun Lifes or your Voyas or your Tokyo Marine HCCs, that they do their own underwriting and they reinsure or insure the risk. A managing general underwriter does the underwriting, but somebody else, another insuring entity, it is written on their paper. So you remember that term. What paper do they write on? So an example might be, a local example, Pace Underwriters underwrites on companion paper. Partners MGU underwrites on U.S. Fire paper. They are acting on behalf of the insurer, but they are not taking the risk. Somebody else is taking that risk on their paper, okay? So pros and cons of MGUs. I'm not necessarily pro or against. I think they have definitely served their purpose, and I know some great ones. There's also some common objections that get presented to doing business with an MGU, so I'm going to present those in a neutral way as if I were throwing those objections out. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I'm going to present it to you again in an objective way. So pros of doing business with an MGU. Oftentimes, one of the biggest reasons you're soliciting quotes from them is they are offering you consistently competitive options, or maybe they are the most competitive option that you've been given on a particular case. So you're going to go, well, this looks like our best option. Let's dig in a little bit. So realistically, why are you doing business with MGU? At the end of the day, they're going to need to be competitive just like anybody else. Okay. You also have the opportunity for a more local relationship. So there's plenty of MGUs that specifically focus on business within their geographic region, whether it's local, whether it's statewide, maybe it's a region itself of the country, but you do have the opportunity to potentially go directly to decision makers within that organization and develop a relationship with those folks because they're nearby. And I think that should never be discounted as a reason to do business with somebody, okay? They also might like specialty type risk. For example, there's some MGUs that just absolutely love reference-based pricing. So if you have a client that you're either presenting that idea to them, or they already have a reference-based pricing arrangement, you might say, hey, I'm going to go to that MGU because I know they know how to underwrite it and I know they offer competitive rates, so we're going to go to them, okay? They also might have flexibility, and I'm going to kind of combine that with niche programs as well. So flexibility in two ways. One, there's plenty of MGUs that underwrite on multiple insurance carrier papers, so they might have different rules and contingencies and constraints depending on which paper they're underwriting on, so they have some flexibility there if they choose to use one or the other. They also have flexibility in really assessing niche programs. And so what I mean by that is, maybe somebody's presented this new idea and they've got this packaged, level-funded small group solution with a TPA and a PBM and a cost containment program and a specialty network and all sorts of awesome bells and whistles. And they have an MGU that has said, you know what? We believe in your vision, so we're going to underwrite that and we'll be your sole stop loss carrier for this niche program, right? So oftentimes they are carving out spaces within the industry in order to win business and position themselves against the big bad dogs in the industry, okay? So what are some cons? Well, con, again, objection, not necessarily a con, depends on the situation, but financial stability often gets presented as that initial knee-jerk reaction, especially from competitors of MGUs. They might say, you know what, well, what paper do they write on? What's their AM Best rating? Can they pay a big claim? How stable are they? So you will often see this as the first attempt to undermine a competitive MGU on a particular RFP by saying, well, hey, are they financially stable enough to reinsure your client's risk, okay? So again, you can dig into that a little bit, really easy research to do, ask some questions. Doesn't necessarily mean that's an impediment at all, but it gets presented as one all the time. One that is a realistic reason to have some concern is the potential for an additional layer in the claims decision-making process. So an MGU is underwriting again on behalf of an insurer's paper. So who's ultimately making the decision on claims? Does the MGU have authority up to a certain threshold themselves? Is there a third party that's inserted to do the claims adjudication process? So, or maybe you would be fourth theoretically at that point. Or, is there a delay that happens when these two entities have to discuss a big claim and make sure it's eligible, and does it fit, is it within the constraints of the policy? So you might have a slower, maybe, potential decision-making process, especially on those bigger claims. They also might be more conservative. They don't have the economies of scale that the big guys have, so, they may have to be more conservative. They may not be willing to throw in a no new laser or an experience reward without charging, okay? Because they have to operate within a certain margin, and if they have to push themselves outside of that spectrum, they may not have the ability to say, yes, we'll do that for you, because it's just not likely to be profitable business, okay? So they may be more conservative. They also might have to buy a lower reinsurance threshold. Now, you guys may not know this, but a lot of the carriers reinsure their blocks above a certain dollar amount. So let's call it $5 million for some of the bigger players. Some of them don't do it at all, but some do. So some direct writers might say, you know what, we'll take all the risk above the spec, but below $5 million on an individual claim, and then we're going to offload that risk to another party. Well, MGUs may not have a $5 million threshold. Maybe they have a $1 million threshold. And so therefore, again, how many layers to this cake are we going to have if they have a lower reinsurance threshold? So ask that question. Last but not least, happens all the time in our industry at large. Brokers get acquired all the time. It happens within the MGU space as well. You have folks that start making a name for themselves. They start writing a lot of business. They write profitable business. Maybe they have a nice story or something that differentiates themselves. There's a good chance they're going to be a target for acquisition at some point. Happens all the time. Happened recently. So you may place a piece of business with an MGU and that carrier's paper, and then next year, that may have changed, right? They may not have access to the same papers anymore. They may have been rolled up into a bigger underwriting entity. And so there's, are they being able to do their business as status quo, or now do they have to answer to somebody else? You don't know. So there's always this potential. Direct writers can get bought as well, but happens more often in the MGU space. So pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, objective analysis of what an MGU is, where they can work, where they may have challenges, and I think the last thing I'd say is don't be afraid. Ask these questions, and if you get good answers for everything, there's nothing wrong with placing business with an MGUs. There are some great ones out there, and I would strongly advise you consider adding them to your stable. Okay?